Well, hello, friend, and welcome to episode 105 of the Intentional Leader Podcast. I'm Cal, and I'm really excited to have you here today. Today is a great conversation with two incredible leaders, Ryan Hawk and Brook Cupps. We explore their new book, The Score That Matters, which actually releases this week. This is a special book. It's really engaging, and I think it's going to help you gain clarity and courage on what really matters in your life, what they call the inner scoreboard. So first, go get this book. Since you're a listener of this podcast, I know it's going to resonate with you. Second, Ryan and Brook inspired me to re-examine my core values. I first began discovering my core values about 6 years ago when I read the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And over the years, I've learned that doing the inner work to crystallize that inner compass is absolutely essential to living an intentional life, a life in alignment with our deepest desires. Another thing I've learned is that most people can't tell you their core values, or they don't think they're practical. They don't think they affect their day-to-day life. And so all of this has led me to create a brand new mini course called Discovering Your Core Values. This course will take you through exercises to discover the deepest parts of yourself and clarify your core values and make them practical for daily living. I'm really excited about this course. I really think it's going to help people. So if you're interested in this course and checking it out, there's a link in the description of this podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube, check it out in the description below. I really think you're going to enjoy my conversation with Ryan and Brook. Ryan's been on the show several times before. He's the host of the very popular podcast, The Learning Leader Show. He's also the author of 2 previous books, Welcome to Management and The Pursuit of Excellence. Brook Cupps is the very successful head basketball coach at Centerville High School in Centerville, Ohio, and the author of Surrender the Outcome. One of the things I really enjoyed about this book is the dynamic between Ryan and Brook, their stories, their perspectives. They really feed off each other well. It makes for a really fun read. Without any further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Ryan Hawk and Brook Cupps. All right. Well, hey, I am so pumped to have Ryan Hawk and Brook Cupps here on the show. Ryan, a huge fan of your work. Obviously, I've read both of your books. And when I heard you were coming out with a new book, I was really excited. I wanted to learn about Brook. Man, this book is going to help so many people. And the great thing about this book, among many things, is I think this book's going to help people as a father, as a husband, as a parent, just in all areas of life. So really excited to dive in. I know we'll run out of time. I want to start though with you, Ryan. In the end of the book, in the acknowledgments, you talk about Brook and you say, "Thank you, Brook, for pushing me toward excellence, living your values, and writing this book with me. Tyler Cohen told me to never pass up an opportunity to partner with someone who is world-class at what they do. And that's you. Thank you." I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about how you and Brook originally got connected and just what it's been like to this relationship to evolve to the point where you're writing a book together. And you both were at Centerville High, or connected to Centerville High, you with football and obviously Brook with basketball. So give us a little bit of the history there.
So I, even though I live in the area, my kids at the time when Brook and I met were not old enough to really be into school enough to where I was following Centerville High School. So I was kind of disengaged, and out of the blue, I got a cold email. I believe was it 2017 maybe, from Brook, and he asked me to come speak to their TLG, this leadership group that him and Eli Liker had formed, which is essentially the captains, I believe, of all of the sports teams and really anybody else who wants to lead at Centerville High School. It was a really well-written note. I had not heard of him because I had not paid attention to Centerville basketball. I had not paid attention to Gabe Cupps and the fame that he had already kind of accrued to that point. But it was really well-written. It was at Centerville. I wanted to try to give back. I went, I spoke, it was okay. And then I got to know Brook that day, and another football coach actually came up. Have you heard about Brook and his son and everything that they're doing at Centerville? I'm like, no. And he's like, you really need to dig into the stuff with their values and tough, passionate, unified, and thankful. And so I started kind of doing my own work beyond just that first interaction, and was really impressed. and thought this could be a person that I want in my life. And I think the cool thing about Brooke is the more you get to know him, the more you'll like. And
Yeah.
I'm not a cynical person, but that's not normal.
Yeah.
Sometimes the more you get
Not
to know
always the
somebody,
case.
the less you like them. And
Yeah.
so as I get a little bit older, I'm trying to surround myself with people like that you see the way that they live, how they're in alignment with what they value, what type of husband and dad they are. And I'm like, yeah, I want to be around people like that. So that's really how I got started.
And then how did it evolve to the point where you were actually writing a book together?
We just kept talking. I mean, we kept going back and forth and sharing ideas and texting. And I think I spoke a couple times. And then I asked him to come to one of my growth summits, which is really where I have my members of my learning leader circles get together in person. And initially, he didn't want to do it, not because he was rude, but because he thought that he wasn't good enough or smart enough, or I don't know why, but he had some sort of imposter syndrome to the business world. And I said, "You're crazy. I think you'd be awesome." And he came and spoke. It was really inspiring. And then afterwards of that time he spoke, I actually sent out surveys to everybody. And other speakers there were like, these kind of big time keynote speakers, and Brooke was there, who is not like in that realm. He's a basketball coach and a leadership teacher, and he was rated by far the best speaker of the event. And so I think that just again solidified that what I had thought prior to that moment was accurate, was true. And then he joined one of my leadership circles, and we just kind of kept talking ever since. And eventually we sat down for 8 hours to record what I thought was going to be an online course. This was 2 years ago. But I brought a friend along to transcribe everything that we said during that time. And after reading through the transcripts, I texted him like, "Hey, I think this could be a book. What do you think?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm down." That's it. And 2 years later, we have a book. So that's kind of, it was pretty simple. Just took the transcripts. No, it was a very painful process. And some of the first drafts were really bad, especially my parts. But we got here to now we have a published book, and the artifact is live, and that's pretty cool.
I will say you guys complement each other very well. It's a really a fun book to read, and I appreciate having an opportunity to read a copy beforehand. But I get what you're saying, right? As I have gotten to know Brooke more, I don't obviously know Brooke, but man, watching your interviews and then just reading your writing, there's something there. And I think this is the perfect book it seems like for Brooke to partner with you on, because it seems like to me he lives so much of what you're talking about in this book about having the score that matters. So Brooke, the title of the book is The Score That Matters: Growing Excellence in Yourself and Those You Lead. And in it, you talk about this idea of kind of an external scoreboard and an inner scoreboard. Obviously, you're a basketball coach, and Ryan, with his football background, I love the analogy there. But tell us, what is the difference between an external scoreboard, internal scoreboard? How did you guys come up with this name and focus for the book?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think the main thing is what's controllable and what's not controllable. I mean, I think that's what it comes down to. And then trying to live your life in a way that you're controlling the things that you can control, and you're basing your success on that rather than what everybody else tells you to base it on. You know, getting to the title of the book and deciding on that, I mean, we had no idea what we were going to title it. We just kind of looked at all the stuff that we had. We had done some core value work and some internal work. We kind of knew like the idea behind what we wanted. We wanted you to basically decide success on your own terms, like figure out what is important to you, dismiss the opinions of others in terms of, defining that success and holding that to yourself. And so after looking at all that stuff, Ryan, I don't remember exactly how we got to the title itself, but I know we went back and forth a ton of times with a bunch of different titles, and think this one's perfect. Like it explains the book. It explains, sums up what we want. I mean, very clearly.
Yeah, it actually,
Go ahead.
Cal, I had sent it to a few friends, And one of them, Liam Murray, who's a mutual friend of Brooke and mine in our leadership circle. And Liam's he's a lawyer as well, Cal, and really smart, really good writer. And he's helped me in the past with my previous books, usually with editing, like very early drafts. And I said, we're still kind of trying to figure out a name here, and that was one of his ideas, was the score that matters. And so, because really focusing on, and there's a Warren Buffett quote. We don't put it in the book, but essentially there are two scoreboards in life, and he calls them scorecards, but we switch it to scoreboard, the inner scorecard and the outer one. It's really helpful if you can live by the inner one. And I think that is when you're thinking about the outer scoreboard and the material possessions and the opinions of others outside of your foxhole and all of the flashy things that are out there, as opposed to the inner scoreboard of your values, the behaviors that go along with those values, the beliefs, and then living in alignment with all that stuff. That's kind of understanding the score that matters most. And so it was helpful, though, to put words to that, because now we have like a dedicated language to speak when people are asking about it. So that's from my recollection through this messy process of how we got here.
Yeah, I feel like when I think about that, it's just people that I know that live by their inner scoreboard. They just have a peace, and there's an attractiveness to them. There's a clarity that they possess. And it's just like, man, I want to get around that person. I want more of that. Brooke, what do you think it takes to cultivate that type of mindset, that type of life where you begin to live more by an inner scoreboard than this external scoreboard?
I mean, the first thing is self-awareness. I think you don't realize, I mean, you can't change it until you recognize it. And so when you realize you're living and operating by an external scoreboard, that's the first step. You've got to recognize it, and then you've got to decide you want to change it. And then once you change it, you got to figure out who you want to be. So you got to create, like, okay, so I'm not living in line with who I want to be. So who do I want to be? So you got to do some self-discovery and reflection, and that sounds real easy and real, like, simple, but like the depth of that is so, I mean, it's hard. Like, it's hard to really look at yourself honestly and say, like, man, I'm not who I want to be. Like, so I got to change, and then face those changes that are going to be, habits that you've done for 30, 40, 50 years for some people, and adjust those. And then, you get into, in our leadership class, we go self-awareness, purpose, courage, and then personal standards. And I think that's really the process. It's like you become aware of it, you decide who you want to be within your purpose. Then you got to have the courage to actually live it. Like, a lot of people say and figure out kind of what they want to do. And then when when the rubber meets the road and stuff starts getting hard, they don't have the courage to stand up and be the person who they say they want to be. And then you got to create a system within your life that allows you to repeat that and check it and refine it and, uphold the standard that you want to live by.
Brooke, you had a blog post where you talked about success posers. And I think that did a good job of just kind of laying out the external, internal. Can you tell us a little bit about that story that you lead off with in that post?
I mean, I just think there's a lot of people that want to put on a front that they're successful. Like, it's in I don't know. I always just think about, like, if my parents wanted me to be a lawyer and that's all they wanted me to be, they wanted me to be a lawyer, and I go become a lawyer. But in my whole life, I just wanted to write books. I just wanted to tell stories, and then am I really successful? And I think reframing it to what your definition of success is the only way to truly evaluate that. And so, I think the success posers are the ones that just latch onto society's definition of success and just roll with it and never consider what success actually means to them. And for most, I mean, for kids in my class, it's money, cars, women. Like, it's the things that everybody knows. And then, taking the time to really figure out what you want and really defining your success is where I think the magic is.
What do we do with those things? Like, I mean, obviously, I mean, you guys are both driven people. I mean, you're both accomplishing a lot. You're making a big impact. I mean, you're a coach, Brooke. You're trying to win championships, of course. Like, it's not that you don't want to win championships. You don't want to have these external metrics. Ryan, you've got a huge, incredible platform. You've got podcasts that are reaching millions of people. You're putting out another book. I mean, you are achieving things that externally, objectively, people want to have. And I'm assuming you want to produce these things as well. So, like, what do we do with those external metrics that it's kind of hard to just completely ignore the external scoreboard in the world that we live? And in fact, I would argue it's increasingly hard to do that. So what do we do with that while trying to kind of build more of a focus on our internal scoreboard?
I mean, the score will take care of itself. Bill Walsh from years ago, and Cal, I know it's a book you like. I do too. We've talked about it before, but the external it's funny how it works. For the people who seem to be most focused on their internal scoreboard, the external one seems to go better for them. If you look at all of the guys and girls who are good at this, who are already doing it, some of the people that we look up to. Centerville wins their first ever state championship in boys basketball, led by a coach and a point guard who live by the score that matters. Right? There's countless other people that we look up to that do the same way, and so it just feels like, for me, as I've gotten better at this, because in this book, I'm more of like the student and Brooks the teacher. He's just further ahead of me than I am. And I've made some good progress with his help. And I think that's what makes it readable and fun because it's not fun. Two experts. Neither of us would call ourselves an expert, but it's one person a little bit further ahead than the other person, in a way, having a conversation with each other, sharing stories of ourselves as well as other people of how to live by this way. And so I found, though, the more and more you look, the people who live through this values-based, critical behaviors aligned with those values, not necessarily thinking about the outside noise, but focused on what they're doing, they seem to have the best outcomes. It's funny how it works.
Yeah,
anything you add to that, Brooke?
Yeah, I just think of it as process over results. And so I think a lot of people define their success on the results that they get and don't have the discipline to define it on the process that they take. And so if you will stay committed and faithful to your process, and then the results typically take place. That's why the score takes care of itself, is because the process that you've laid in place to establish that score is good. And so when your process doesn't work, you look at your process, you change your process, and hopefully you get different results. So that's how I think about it, is just it's the score that matters is the process that you're embracing.
But Cal, I think one thing is, it's not like we don't want to win or have these big results. We want those too. It's just that's not what we're focused on. We're focusing on to me, like that's why I like the endurance over brilliance mindset that I learned from Eric Adams, which I'm sure he learned from somebody else. But I'm not necessarily going to show up brilliant every once in a while, but I will endure each day and show up to work. And Brooke and I think very much have this in common, of we're going to consistently show up and do the work each day, whether we feel good, we feel bad, whether we won, whether we lost. And I think people can also relate to that, because that is within our choice. Yeah. We get to make that decision if we're going to show up to work each day. And plodding along is so not sexy or hacky or fun for other people, I would say, to at least look at. That's not the answer they want when they ask at the end of a keynote, what's the hack or what can I do? But really, that's the answer. It's like, well, get up and work tomorrow, and then the next day, and then the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And maybe 2 years later, you'll have a book or you'll have whatever you want. Because like now we just got these, by the way. Now, like we get
Oh,
this cool artifact with these
yeah.
two cool like embossed cover,
Yeah.
dude. It's pretty sweet, but it only happens because we're willing to say, well, we're not. This isn't really good yet, but we got to keep plotting along. Get some help, obviously, from other people that are smarter than us to help us a little bit, and eventually, you get here. And I think that's to me that's inspiring. Like I love seeing stories like that because I can do that. I
Yeah.
can't necessarily be brilliant, but I can
Yeah.
I can show up each day, and so I like stories like that.
Yeah. For me, like I like to run, and I noticed that I kind of stopped running as much because I would typically just sign up for a race and then I would run a lot right before the race. But then when the race was over, I was like, oh, what's my goal now? What's my focus? And now I kind of have more process oriented. Like every week I'm going to run a certain amount of miles. It's just what I do. And it's amazing when race time comes around, I do a lot better. It's not just the focus. And I think that resonates with people. I wonder, Ryan, could you talk, and I'd love to hear from Brooke too. What are some of the process oriented goals that you've adopted over time?
So my core values are thoughtful, thankful, curious, and consistent. And so really all my goals are designed around being thoughtful, thankful, curious, and consistent. And like for example, my thankful value, which the critical behavior that aligns with that is leave people, places, and things better than I found them. The short version of that is just leave it better. And so that's something I can say and I can measure myself on each day. And I those are like actual behaviors that I can do
Mm-hmm.
each day to see, did I leave Cal better today? Did I leave Brooke better today? Now, because I found you guys here, did I leave you better than I found you? That's an actually active goal of mine each day. And so I think if I stack up enough days of being thoughtful, thankful, curious, and consistent, the score is going to take care of itself. The results will take care of themselves. And so I think it's got to be designed, and I learned this from Brooke, obviously, but it's got to be designed around what you value, your purpose, and then that's how it is. Now, consistency is one of my core values, being a consistent leader, and so work wise, right? I ship every Sunday night at 7:00, right? Never miss.
Yeah,
9 years.
You never miss.
that is a part of my like essence in being, is being a
Yeah.
consistent person, because
Yeah.
again, if you aren't going to be like super brilliant, you can choose to be consistent, and then that builds trust, and then that creates an audience,
Yeah.
and that creates people that want to follow along, and they believe in you and they trust you, and I feel a little bit beholden to that, and I just love the feeling of being consistent. I think that's I want friends who are consistent. I want a spouse who's consistent. I want to be around people who are consistent, and I need to kind of go first in that regard. So that's how those are just a couple of my process oriented goals that when I'm honoring them and living up to those values, things seem to go well.
Yeah, and I've heard you talk before about just the momentum that creates too, of just doing that over and over and over and over again.
And there's no question, like it's just gonna happen. Like,
yeah, this is what
we
I
don't
do.
question it. We're not like saying maybe. It's just going to happen, And I think that's, in a way, it's freeing. I think it's great to have that. It's like, okay, yeah, this is what we're gonna do, and I like designing my days that way.
And you can control it. And I loved how, and audience folks, just pay attention to how Ryan and I'm sure Brooke is the same way, just connecting the process oriented goals to those core values. And it sounds like for you, Ryan, it's even a daily thing of just, hey, reflecting back on the day. How did I make the people, places, and things in my life better today? Did I make Cal better? Did I make Brooke better? And I think I'll talk about it a little bit, but you guys helped me clarify my values just by reading this book. And even last night I was thinking about, because I was going through my values. My values are abide, which comes from John 15 in the Bible, serve, grow, teach, and dance. I actually added dance because of you guys, and I can explain that. But it's last night I was just thinking through like how did I show up today? Who did I teach today? How did I serve today? Did I abide? For me, that just means starting my day in a state of prayer and just gratefulness and kind of putting myself before the Lord. And anyway, it's amazing when you create the values that are thoughtful, and then you think about how that shows up. in the small moment to moment parts of life. And to the point you guys are saying, that builds a beautiful life over time once you've kind of figured out that process and
Did
where
you
what your
is that an
true
Army thing, or have you how long have you had these values in place and living them out?
yeah, so I actually 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I read the book, and it was probably one of the first times that I actually sat down and actually did
Nice.
the eulogy exercise, and
Yeah.
that's where I started the process of developing my values. And I think at that point, I know serve was a value, I know grow was a value. Um, I wanted something like abide to be a value, and then over time, I think I've just kind of whittled away, and then your book and kind of some of your discussions help me clarify. I think I'm pretty happy with where I'm at right now. They not only do they anchor me, but they inspire me. And I think that's kind of the cool part about values is you can kind of keep them top of mind, and it really helps you stay anchored and show up the way you want to show up.
Talk about, Brooke, the aspirational elements too, because it sounds like Cal. I mean, all of our values are aspirational, but it feels like Cal's living that too. We just had this conversation yesterday, in fact. So
Yeah, I think everybody starts off with their values being aspirational. I mean, and there will always be to some extent that we're never, we've never arrived, always becoming. But we have real values, we have aspirational values, and we have accidental values. And so, those real ones are the ones that we're actually living. If we look at our calendar, if we look at where we're spending our money, our time and our money typically tell us what our real values are. Our accidental ones, our friends will tell us what our accidental ones are. And sometimes our calendar, if we really look at it closely, will tell us where we're spending time that we don't really want to spend, but it's a value because that's what we're investing our time in. And then the aspirational ones, that's who we want to become. And, hopefully those are the ones that we're targeting and setting in front of us to work towards every day. And those goals, I don't really set goals. My goal is to be tough, passionate, unified, and thankful every day. And then by being tough, passionate, unified, and thankful, I fulfill my purpose of inspiring others to strive for excellence over success. Because excellence to me is the best version of yourself. And you're your best when you're on fire and you're living in the purpose that you're here for. And so, success to me is comparison. That's how I think of success. That's how I think people judge success. Like I'm better, more money, better job, all that stuff. And so I want to try to inspire people to focus on the excellent part rather than the success part.
And what is excellence? How do you define excellence?
Excellence is the best version of yourself.
Okay.
And so I think the best version of yourself is you living in your values, being authentic and true to the person you were created to be. We're all created differently, all created with different gifts. Be true to that.
Brian, looked like you wanted to say something.
Oh, I mean, I'm complete alignment.
Yeah.
I love the Pat Riley quote, excellence is the gradual result of always striving to do better. And that's just, again, that's aspirational for me. Like, am I striving to do better? One of my values is being curious, and curiosity, like the critical behavior to go along with that, is stretching my zone of competency. And so I can, a prompt, I'm a prompt driven thinker and writer, but a prompt at the end of the day is, for me, is what did I do today to be a little bit wiser going to bed than I was when I woke up, right? The Charlie Munger quote. And the curiosity value really hits that, because if I'm stretching myself, that usually means meeting with or talking to somebody who is far wiser than me, has more knowledge than me. That stretches me, especially, as you know, Kyle, as a podcast host, you're going to prepare. And then so that preparation works as a forcing function to learn and to expand your curiosity even more, to develop questions. Then you have a conversation with a person and hopefully you connect. And it's like the coolest feeling there is, because you met maybe somebody you really look up to and you connected with them on a deeper level and you learned from them. And then that helps ensure you're going to bed a little bit wiser than you were when you woke up. And if you stack enough of those days, again, it's funny, like the opportunities that kind of come your way just seem to happen. It's not necessarily an accident, but like cool people reach out wanting to do work, or whatever. I mean, Brooke and I get to work with some really like impressive clients that sometimes they look at each other and say like, these guys are way ahead of us. Like, what are they doing hiring us? But they do. And so we just try our best to add value to their lives. And that's wild that this keeps happening, but it's more and more by the day. And so it's like maybe this whole process thing is right. It seems to lead us to pretty good situations.
And it's all stuff you can control. And
Yep.
Brooke, can you talk a little bit about some of your process oriented goals, whether it's individual or as a basketball coach?
Yeah, I mean, just like Ryan's, they go right with my core values. So tough is my first core value. My behavior with tough is positive body language. And so I just try to enter any space that I go into with positive body language. That one took me a long time to get to, actually, because I thought at first toughness was just kind of showing up, just constantly showing up. And then, sure enough, I had a kid walk into the weight room moping around, and like there was nothing tough about him, and he was there. And so I was like, okay, that can't be my core, that can't be my behavior with it. But I love positive body language, because I don't think anything tough has ever been done without that mentally switching to, okay, I got this. All right, here I come.
Is that just kind of is that upbeat when you say positive? Is that what you're talking about?
Yep. Just attacking the moment. Like my behavior, my mantra that goes with that is fight ready. So like,
Got it.
I mean, I'm a big Rocky fan. So if you like Rocky coming into the ring, like ready to go, you don't see a boxer like head down, shoulders slumped, walking into the ring, right? So fight ready is like, all right, like, Ryan talked about that first talk that I gave at his circle, and it was like, I remember sitting there and just being like, all right, I don't know why these guys want me to talk to them, but that felt like, here it comes.
Yeah.
You're just getting my best. I don't know what it's going to be, but you're getting my best.
Yeah.
And so just trying to approach every interaction, every opportunity with that mentality, I think is really what the root of toughness is. And then passionate for me is choosing extra work. And so I think everything in life is always determined by the extra. Like we talk about it with basketball, like everybody practices 2 hours a day, everybody lifts weights, and so it's like, okay, well, what sets you apart? What gives you an advantage? What puts you ahead? And I just think it's what else are you willing to do? And maybe that's your diet, maybe that's your sleep, maybe that's another hour in the gym. But just being willing to consistently choose extra work. I try to be very efficient with my time. Like I don't waste very much time. I'm never sitting there scrolling on my phone. I'm using my time to try to make myself better, make my team better, do something for my family. I'm trying to maximize that time. So that's passionate for me. Unified is speaking and acting with urgency. So for me, unified is like that. I mean, I'm a team guy. Like I've never been very good at anything by myself. And so but within a team, I'm a lot better, and I can hopefully make people better that are with me. So speaking and acting with urgency is all about valuing your time. So when I think of it with my family, it's like, it's almost like being present. Like, am I present, or am I thinking about practice, or am I thinking about the thing that I got to do tomorrow? I want to be, acting with urgency, that the time that we have matters. And along those same lines, speaking with urgency is like, I want to tell you the truth. Like I want to be a truth teller. I'm not going to waste your time. Like truth is love, in my opinion. And a lot of people want to stray away from it. And I just try to be as honest as I can, as loving as I can, but as honest as I can with that. And so with my players, with my family, with my friends, I try to just shoot them straight. And so that to me, doing that consistently is hard to do. Like it's hard because you want to be like, I don't know. I don't know how they'll take that. And sometimes you just gotta go tell them and hug them afterwards. Popovich used to say, what did he say? He said, hug them coach them hard and hug them hard, or something like that, where it's just like,
Mm.
you're going after them, but you're also showing them the love that they deserve. And then thankful is showing love for me. That's my core value. We do it with touches in our basketball program. So we try to be intentional about getting touches and think that will bleed into everything else that we do, and applies to the basketball, or to my life outside of basketball too. Just showing love to the people that are important to me, that add value to my life, and trying to be intentional about that, and building a system to where I do that, because that one honestly is not real natural for me. I'm pretty quiet. I'd probably be a hermit and not around anybody if it was just completely up to me, but I know that's not best for me or for anyone else. So I've got to be intentional with that one.
And I know Ryan's already talked about it, but the way you show up, Brooke, there's kind of an attractiveness about you because you're just so clear about who you are. And because of that, I think people just want to be around you. But then hearing you just talk through real quick, all right, these are my core values, these are my process oriented goals, this is how I show up. I think for those of us listening and kind of observing, I think that's it. Like, we see that the level of thought that you've put into this results in this level of clarity that very few people have. And I've heard you talk a little bit about really appreciating the quiet space. Like, you need quiet space I don't know if that's like with a journal or what that looks like, but can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what that looks like for you, Brooke, when you're having that quiet time and you're thinking about life, you're reflecting and probably forming a lot of these thoughts that end up being how you show up. Like, what does that look like for you when you're having that quiet time and developing some of these convictions?
Yeah, that's usually the morning for me. And that started, when our kids were young. That was when I could do it without compromising family time. And so I get up pretty early. Like, when I wrote my first book, I would get up over COVID, I would get up at 4:30 and just write for 4 or 5 hours before anybody else got up. And now it's, I'll get up, I work out, I meditate, I pray, I do a 3-minute ice bath, and like that time. And then I fill out my journal. Every morning, I reflect on my core values. I have like a scripture that I reflect on, that's consistent. And then I do a list of thankfuls, a list of my prayer, kind of my prayer bullets, and then stories that from the previous day, that I want to remember. And I hope, 50 years from now, when I'm dead, my kids will find my journals and be like, oh, that was cool. So I kind of make note of things that happened throughout the previous day, and try to make sure I live a day that has some stories in it. But that is my reflection time. I really, and I wasn't good at it. Probably, that's been within the last 6 or 7 years that I've been very intentional and done that consistently. Before that, I didn't do it, and I would veer away from my values a lot more. But the reflection, if you think about it, it's really like you have to reflect. Like, how do you adjust? It's like a coach playing a game and not watching a film. Like, why would you do that? Like, why would you not go back and see what you made mistakes on? Because I know after a game that I coach, my vision of it, and then when I go back and watch the film, those things aren't the same. They're never exactly the same. And so why wouldn't I take that time of my own life to reflect on the tape and see what really happened?
Ryan, let's say there's someone out there listening or watching, and they are like, I love this idea of core values, but I don't even know where to begin. And I've heard you talk about how in the beginning you had, 20 core values, hung it up on your wall. Where would you advise someone to begin the process of establishing core values, and what's the right amount of core values?
Well, I think we've established the right amount. It's probably like 3 or 4. If everything's a value, then nothing's a value. You're right. The first time the Hawk family values hanging up, there was roughly 20 on there. They're all good. Don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they were great values. nobody remembered all of them. Nobody remembered half of all of them. So that though that's a start. I mean, I would say that's a start, is to list a certain number of ones that are important to you. What we've talked about that's helpful is to think of people that you deeply admire. Think of people that you look up to, and some of the core attributes of that person or those people. What it is about them, what do they do, how do they show up, usually it's like hopefully, like in both of our cases, our dads are those people for us, or at least one of those people that we looked up to that helps us. And in when we were writing this, we did write next to each value and critical behavior of what person or people in our lives that value, that exhibit that value that we then look up to and try to do ourselves. So I think, one, getting started, just flat out thinking about this. There's an amazing amount of people that don't even get that far. They don't have enough awareness. They don't spend enough time reflecting. They don't even think about it. Because we all have values. Every person has them. You just may not know them. Your values are basically how you live your life. So I think it's helpful is to think about people that you really admire, and what it is. Like Coach Ron Allery's note-taking process is something that I found fascinating, and then had a long conversation with both him and his wife, because his wife buys all the note cards for him, to learn about why does he take so many notes, and what does he write, and how does that work? And then that got into some of the curious and thoughtful values for me, is the fact of he's a deeply curious person. He's also extremely thoughtful, and part of his process to ensure he's living out those values is he takes notes all the time, every practice, every game, halftime, like, and he's reflecting on them and bringing them out. So like that's how it got me closer to thoughtful, thankful, curious, and consistent, was thinking of people that I admire, how they show up, what they do, even if they haven't named those values, but just I've kind of figured them out through watching them. And then I eventually, Brooke was right there with me creating this process, eventually kind of narrowed them down to 4.
Yeah, and I didn't realize that consistency came from AJ. Obviously, it's something that you value already, but just I love the story about him showing up every morning to work out. That was just a great example.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of like kind of our family's DNA. I think my dad's that way, and so we, no matter what, you just show up. Like, and we had fun in college, but we had this kind of unwritten rule that, we were never going to miss the morning lift, like 100%, no matter what. And so the story I wrote about of him showing up after they beat Michigan, is just a normal day. I mean, it doesn't really matter. It wasn't a big deal, because that's just what you do. You go work out. And I think, he's had a lot of accolades and all those outer scoreboard things, but it's all because he was married to the process of working each day, and certainly has ability and skill, and was born with some stuff. But I think what kind of takes you from being pretty good to Hall of Fames and stuff like that is the work part of it.
Yeah, after reading the book, one of the reasons that I added dance is because I just admire my children and just how much fun they have, and just they make, like, the littlest thing is just fun, and we like to just crank up the music and just dance. And I'm not a great dancer, but it just highlights that, like, you can do something hard but make it fun, and you can look for ways in your day to seek joy and seek fun, even while you're doing real work, as we would say as adults. But anyway, I love thinking about, like, who are the people that really make you excited, and who you admire the most, and how can that shape your values. And another reason that dance is there, because it helps me confront fear, because for me, dancing, especially in public, is not something that I'm particularly excited to do. And you guys talk in the book about fear, and fear being something that can be a fuel for us. Ryan, can you tell us a little bit about just how you approach fear, and just some of the fears that show up in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Brooke to add on after I go, because he helped crystallize this for me when we were sending this part of the book back and forth, especially with some of Jay Shetty's work. I talked to Cody Keenan. He was a speechwriter for President Obama, and he said he used fear as fuel. I kind of like that language. I got told by my high school coaches that I was going to start as a freshman at Centerville as a quarterback, undersized, skinny guy. I did not. I thought they were crazy. I was like, what are you talking about? I did not have that belief. And so, but when they told me that, I wasn't really excited. I was just really scared, and mainly for my teammates, because you see these old, I'm 14, and you see these 18-year-olds. I'm like 145 pounds. These huge linemen that I have to go in the huddle and call plays and stuff. Like, it's really scary. Yeah. But mostly scary is like, I just don't want like these juniors and seniors to not have the type of year they want to have because they're playing me. And they benched a returning starter. He was a junior starter, and he was coming back for his senior year. They moved him to another position, so they didn't bench him, but he was the guy. And so they're like, who's this guy? And so it was just, I think I used, and maybe I should rephrase it as Jim Collins might and call it productive paranoia, where I was able to use to make it productive when it comes to being scared about just letting my teammates down. And I think that was a very motivating force for me to work really hard and to be overly prepared and to understand what I was supposed to do and to do it with everything I've got, right? Like my coaches would always say, we won't be mad at you if you make a mistake. We will be mad if you make a mistake not going 100 miles an hour. They always said that. You got to go 100 miles an hour. So if you go 100 miles an hour and you make a mistake, we're okay with it. But you can't be going 70 miles an hour and make a mistake. You got to be going. And so I thought, like, all right, let me just go 100 miles an hour. Let me try to execute my job and try not to be like the weak link of this team. And, that was all fear-based for me. And that seemed to work. And I've taken some of that, into other parts of my life. But Brook brought a lot more perspective as to how that's more productive maybe than just being scared. And so I want to ask him maybe to go deeper on some of the Jay Shetty stuff that he helped me with writing that part of the book.
I guess I think of fear as I think we release ourselves from fear when we release ourselves from the opinions of others. I think that's probably the easiest way to say it. I think a lot of our fear is based on what we're afraid other people will say and think. Kyle, you sound like you come from a Christian like frame of reference, right? Yeah. And so, from a Christian standpoint, you have an audience of one, right? So the opinions of others, they should be completely irrelevant. So what is there to be afraid of? There becomes fear becomes a complete, doesn't exist. Like, it's not a thing. Like, you have no reason to fear anything from that standpoint. And so, most people's fears around failure and not doing it well. And Kobe talks about kind of like an experimenter's mindset. Like, failure is not even a thing. Like, you're just going to try again. Like, what is it? Like, it makes no sense. Because if I fail today, I'm just going to try tomorrow. Yeah. And so, the only way to actually fail is if you quit trying. And so I think when you start looking, like, it takes some time. Like, I had to really dig into, like, what am I afraid of? Like, what am I afraid of losing? Like, I had a text from a coach that I've talked to a bunch. He's from Georgia, and he'll text me questions and stuff. And he just said, how do you get around like the fear of losing as you get deeper and deeper into the tournament? And I just said, go home and ask your kids if they care if you won.
Keep perspective. Yeah.
Like, just go play with your kids. Like, they want to go outside and play, and you push them on their bike, whether you won or not. And so when you get some perspective about it, you start realizing that almost all of those stories you tell yourself around fear are completely false. You've made them all up. And so when you can get to that place, then I think I like Ryan said, it's very empowering and allows you to just go. And so, sure, sometimes you're going to fail, sometimes you're not, and sometimes fear is going to sneak its way back in. But that's been good for me. It's allowed me to, I think, stay very, very true to my process and stay very true to who I want to be.
Ryan, one of the things you talk about in the book is that fear, you're about to give a huge keynote and maybe some fear creeps in, but that you have a specific, in the book, you talk about kind of a simple solution and then an outcome bet on the other end of that. Talk to us about that, what that looks like for you when you're giving a keynote or about to give a keynote and you're kind of having a little bit of fear creep in.
I mean, I have one on Thursday, so this is kind of top of mind right now. There's still some nerves. I'm envisioning the room. I'm wondering, am I gonna leave them better than I found them? Make sure that they feel they got a lot more value than they're paying me. So all those could potentially be fear, but really the cure for that, the greatest medicine for any of that fear is being overly prepared, which I feel I know what I'm going to say. I know how I'm going to open. I know the walk-up music. Like I know what I'm doing. I've really prepared. So to me, again, if you're not like otherworldly talented or have just built up so much skill, like John Maxwell can just walk out and absolutely destroy, probably without even preparing anymore. But like, that's not necessarily true because he's been preparing for the last 50 years doing it. But I think that's just the greatest medicine for any of it, for me at least, is just knowing that the work, and that again, that goes back to Ron Ullery and Bob Gregg, like how do they help with that, is that we're going to be overly prepared. So when the lights are shining bright, you just go out and execute. And that's kind of what I say to myself is execute. You know, I don't know if you're referring to the like funny texting between my dad and I, but he it's like a little alter ego ish, which is definitely outside of his personality. He's much more humble than I am, but he'll say like, I'm the baddest dude in this room. And so you kind of have to believe this, like I'm going to go put on a show. And sometimes that can be helpful too. If your ultimate goal of the day is to leave those people in the room better than you found them, which is my goal. That's it, is to leave them better. So they say, yeah, I'm glad we did that. And so I think the combination of preparation, a little the fun things I do with my dad are helpful so that when the time comes, you go up and you do a good job.
Yeah, and I think fear is a funny thing. Like I've noticed even recently that sometimes it's not, I won't immediately notice that fear is driving my behavior. But then when I kind of dig deeper and I excavate a little bit, I'm like, oh, wow. Like you're actually just afraid in some cases to succeed. Like you're afraid to, like sometimes with a podcast, like or leaning into something fully, it's like, you think that you have a lot going on, but actually you're avoiding something because of fear. So I think the frames that you guys put in this book, and I mean, this book is really, really good. It gives both perspectives, and I think it's going to change people's lives. I mean, that's not hyperbole. I think this book, if you read it, and you guys have so many practical applications at the end of it to immediately apply, kind of like I talked about with 7 Habits, where I did that eulogy exercise, and it changed my life. But you guys have at the end of every chapter, you have something like that to help people not just learn and gain knowledge, but to start applying it to their situation and to kind of get to a place like, Brooke here, where there's just clarity in your life and then the courage to go and execute on it. Now let's talk real quick at the end here about community, because I think, to me, you got to have clarity, you got to have courage, you got to be consistent, but then you also need community around you to carry you and to help you really show up as best you can in any situation. And you guys both talk about kind of those 3 a.m. friends, the foxhole friends, people in your life that are in that inner circle that speak life into you or speak truth to you. I wonder if, as we're wrapping up here, if you could both just kind of coach us on, one, what do you look for in those people? And what would you recommend people think about when they're looking for those kind of people? Let's start with you, Ryan.
I look at people that, I mean, when I think of like the who's of my life, I think there's 3 categories: ahead, beside, behind. And it seems like for here, maybe we're focusing more on some of the ahead and beside. The behind parts are about, pouring into others, helping them, and teaching, and how teaching is a good tool for clarity. So I'll put that on the side. But the beside and ahead people, for me, what I'm looking for when it comes to the Foxhole friends, 3am friends coined that, who would you call if you're stuck on the side of the road, your car breaks down at 3 a.m., who's going to come, get you without any questions asked, right? I look at people who've accomplished some things that I'd like to accomplish, but most importantly, they've done it in a way in which I deeply admire. The way that they carry themselves, they do have a set of values and actually live by them. And then I think another important part of those people is that they tell me the truth, unvarnished truth. They're not mean-spirited ever, but they tell me the truth. And I know that they're rooting for me, because you do have some of those ones who sneak in that, like, jealousy is a thing of life. Like, we all have jealous moments, or an envy is real, right? And I don't think those people belong in that group. Like, I know I want those people to genuinely be rooting for me. I'm genuinely rooting for them, and they're willing to tell me the truth, and I'm willing to tell them the truth. And it specifically comes up when it might sting, it might hurt. And I love people like that. There aren't enough people like that. I wish there were more. And so I'm trying to be that for others as well. It's like, again, Charlie Munger's great quote, how do I get a great wife? How do I get a great friend? Deserve one. And I think that's how I try to live, is like, it starts with me internally and being the type of person that others would want to tell the truth to, that others would want to hang out with. But it starts here. It's not me like trying to do something. It's about me trying to like live authentically within myself, and then also being a truth teller, caring for people, loving people, being selfless, right? Being selfish is when you see something negative about a friend, but you're afraid to tell them. That's selfish, right? Brooke can go deeper on this. I learned this from him, but being selfless is seeing something in one of your friends and telling them, knowing that it could temporarily hurt them, but ultimately, like, you tell them because you love them and you care for them. And that's really the qualities I look for in those 3 a.m. friends.
Ryan, do you do anything to facilitate people being able to be truthful with you, or is that really just more of a testament to them, I guess, and their willingness? I'm just curious about that.
Probably a little
piece.
both. I think it's really important how you accept it. If you immediately start denying it or explaining it away or getting really defensive, nobody, like, I've had bosses who they're like, hey man, okay, I need feedback. Give me feedback. I really want critical feedback. I'm like, okay, great. And I try hard to be value add. And so I give them real critical feedback, and they start getting really defensive and explaining why they did the thing. And I'm like, okay, he doesn't want feedback. That's fine. Move on to the next one. Like, it really matters how you accept it, and how, when somebody says it, that you thank them for it. It doesn't necessarily always mean that it's right, but I think you train people to tell you the truth based on how you receive it. And that's something to be mindful of every time you're getting these truth tellers in your life that share with you.
Yeah, I think that's so key. And I even think, even with my wife, like, sometimes what is being told is not necessarily something I want to hear, but the reaction is critical. If you want to get more feedback and create that environment where people are willing to give it. Brooke, over to you, to whether it's kind of building on that point, or I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on Foxhole friends and what you look for in people that fit that category.
Yeah, Ryan really hit on everything. I would just say, I just pay attention. Just pay attention. Like, the people that are there for you, that care about you for who you are, not what you do. Those are the people, the ones that tell you the truth, the ones that are there when things are really bad. Like, that's a great filter, is when it ain't pretty, when it ain't good, when you suck. Like, who's still around, who's still talking to you, who's still checking in, who's like, I think that's really important. But other than that, I would just say there's not that many. If you think you've got 20, you're wrong. Like, there's not that many, and you don't need that many. But then it doesn't mean that those other friends aren't good friends, and valuable and you care about them. Just they're not going to serve that purpose for you, because you only have a handful of people that are really, foxhole friends, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's so good. And I think in a world where isolation and loneliness is increasing, especially I think as people get more and more senior too, I find that as I observe senior leaders, I feel like they are more and more isolated and lonely. So just having people as you guys are describing, I think is more and more important. So book comes out in March, so pumped. Ryan, anything you want to tell the audience just in terms of the book? Obviously I'll put links to where they can connect with Brooke and Ryan out there, but anything you want to leave the audience with just in terms of how to connect with the book or find you guys?
Thank you for your prep. Thank you for your service to our country. You certainly have much more guts than I do. I've never done anything like what you've done, so I appreciate that. The book, we've talked about it enough. Learningleader.com is where all my stuff is. Brooke writes a blog every week, every Thursday it publishes. It's world-class stuff, so I just highly encourage people to check out his blue-collar grit stuff. And I think that's pretty much it. Did I miss anything, Brooke?
No, I appreciate it, Cal. This was awesome. Great to get to know you. Love what you do. Love how you do it.
Well, thank you guys. This was fun.